Margurite makes a book. Chapter 2, in which Margurite meets many people in different parts of Paris. Half an hour later, Margurite had gotten Papa back home and settled in his bed. Then, Papa's list in her hand, she set out alone to complete his errand. Margurite crossed a bridge over the river Seine and walked a long way until she came to the edge of the city. There she passed through the city gate and down the road where the countryside began. Here there were no cobblestones to stumble over. Here sheep, goats, and cows were raised. Margurite entered a dingy shed behind a farmhouse. Inside it smelled very foul. She quickly fished in her pocket for a handkerchief scented with lavender. She held it up to her nose and tried not to breathe. "Hello," she called in the shadows. "It's Margurite, Jacques the painter's daughter." A bearded man emerged from a side room. It was Bernard. He was always making jokes that Margurite didn't find very funny. Come this way, he said. She followed him into a cleaner room with a window. There she saw stacked against the walls rectangular frames as tall as she was. On them were stretched the finest, most beautiful skins of parchment. Spiral-shaped white shavings littered the floor. "Just one calfskin, please," she said firmly. "Nothing with holes or blemishes. This one, perhaps." Bernard laughed slightly. "You seem to know what you want, don't you?" "Yes," said Margurite, "I do." He cut the sheet from the frame and trimmed it down, so that it was an even rectangle. "You probably want the scrap edges to practice on, don't you? So you can do your little drawings." Margurite frowned at the man as he rolled up the skin. "Thank you," she said, paid him, and raced out the door. "Scraps to practice on," she muttered. "Little drawings." She marched up the long, straight street that led back to the gate of the city. Beyond it lay the market. Margurite pushed her way through the crowds until she found the goose and chicken stall. "And what can I help you with, my dear?" asked Blanche, a red-faced woman wearing a tattered apron. "I need new goose feathers for Papa Jacques' pens and a few eggs, please." "Eggs for supper or for mixing paints?" "For mixing paints." "Very well then," Blanche said. "They are a few days old. They'll give you rich, thick paint. And take one of these," she added, placing a still warm, freshly laid egg in Margurite's hand. "Nice and fresh. Lovely for lunch." Just then, a big goose began to hiss and squawk at Margurite. She turned with a jump and quickly moved on to the vegetable stall nearby, where she bought fresh green parsley. Then she went to one last stall to buy honey in a little pot. Margurite crossed the bridge and back over the river Seine to her own neighborhood in the shadow of the cathedral. The streets were quieter now. She approached a house that seemed to crouch beneath the cathedral's stone gargoyles. As she entered a small room, it took a moment for Marguerite's eyes to adjust to the dim light. There was a peculiar musty smell, like damp spices and moldy straw. Gradually, Margurite began to see the withered roots and dried flowers that hung from the ceilings. A tiny white-haired woman got up from her chair. "Who's there?" she said. The old woman Ninon, the apothecary. She knew everything about herbs and cures. Margurite loved visiting Ninon. "It's me, Margurite, Jacques the painter's daughter," she said a little loudly. Some days Ninon didn't hear very well. "I've come for dried saffron flowers, madder root, a cake of vermilion, some wax, pine pitch, and some lapis lazuli stone." "Lapis lazuli stone?" Ninon shuffled across to a drawer and pulled out a handful of small, dark blue rocks. "These are my last ones," she said softly. "To think, these came from over mountains and deserts, across rivers." Ninon tucked the roots and the stones and everything else into Marguerite's basket. "It looks like your father is going to make a very fine book indeed," she said. Then she waved Marguerite away.